Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Luni Libes, round two. He's CEO at Africa Eats. We're going to talk about startup tips mostly today. Luni's a serial entrepreneur, mentor, investor, author, educator, everything ending in He is manager, impact investor, and single family office, which doesn't rhyme in or, but that's his current reality. And yeah, this podcast is brought to you by podpar.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts, you can go to podpar.com or Google Charles Cormier and podcast, and I will pop there. Luni, welcome to the pod again. Can you start by telling us about your current reality and your day-to-day?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Current reality, startup number 9 got started since we last spoke. Serial entrepreneur, but they overlap now. So I think it's parallel entrepreneur. The new one's Africa Trees. It's a copycat of Africa Eats, but it's focused on land restoration and carbon sequestration in Africa. And we have offers out to over a dozen companies to kick off the portfolio.
Wow. Okay. So start by telling us again about Africa Eats and tell us more in depth about Africa Trees, the why, the how, the who.
Okay. So Africa Eats is a 3.5-year-old investment holding company. It's a mashup of venture capital, business accelerator, and Berkshire Hathaway. It's not a mashup anyone's seen before. We have 24 companies in our portfolio. They're all fast-growing SMEs, as we talk about them in Africa, startups, but real companies moving real products, making real profits, not aspiring to find product market fit. They have that already. And we're the first investor that comes in these companies, and then we help them grow from small, like 50, 100, 200,000 in revenue, past $1 million. We do that with capital. We do that with a lot of help and advice. We'll share some of that today. And all these companies were found through the Fledge Accelerator Network, which I created back in 2012, and we've run programs in 4 continents and helped thousands and thousands of companies.
Wow. Africa Trees now, why?
One of those partner programs in Fledge is called the Land Accelerator. It works on land restoration and carbon sequestration. That's its focus. It does that in 3 continents, but the Africa program is the oldest. We have about 380 graduates now, almost 400 graduates now. And Africa Trees is the mechanism for funding their growth.
And what do you guys do specifically?
God, for the people listening who are entrepreneurs, they understand that starting companies is a big, long, complicated process. It isn't one thing. It's not 10 things either, nor it's 100 things. So we provide advice, we provide training, we try and fill in, the first 100 of those things in terms of knowledge. How to build a plan, how to write a financial model, how to talk to investors, how to organize your sales team. Pretty much anything they need help on, we will provide help on.
Cool. And why did you launch that one 2 weeks ago? Why did Africa Eats needed that support?
All right. So there's 2 holding companies because they have separate missions. And so it's pretty analogous running funds or running investment companies versus running operating companies with customers. Like, we both have to raise money. Like, I'm not rich enough to just do all this out of my own pocketbook. That'd make life so much easier. But my tech companies didn't do it that well. So I got to go out and raise money. And I got to tell a story, of course. What is this money for? Well, it's not for me. The money is for these companies that we're investing in. And so having the focus of saying that these companies work on hunger and poverty, if that's what you care about, put your check here. These companies work on land restoration and carbon. If that's what you care about, put your money there. That actually works. Just like if you go to a customer and you say, I'm selling blue pills. Do you want to buy some blue pills? Versus I'm selling sugar cubes. Like people want the blue pills or red pills. We can do that. The people want the blue pills. They don't want to also buy red pills. You got to have separate sales efforts for those 2. Same thing in the fundraising world for the investors.
Right. Why Africa? Why not Latam?
Africa has the most needs on the planet. So in my work at Fledge, I found far more compelling companies to invest in Africa, companies with humongous opportunities in front of them. It doesn't get talked about in the press much. The way I always talk about this is you see in the press that India has 1.4 billion people. That's repeated over and over and over again. It used to be 1.2, number's been updated. Earlier this year, India passed up China. China has 1.4 billion people. Africa, it's not a country, it's a continent, but Africa has 1.4 billion people. It is the same scale of market. Like, I'm a capitalist, I'm looking for markets. It's the same scale of market as India or China. It's just bigger. So it's more spread out, and it happens to be 54 countries. But sorry, I'm going to sneeze.
What's the percentage of like capitalism at play via social stuff at play here? 80% capitalist, 20% social?
Nobody knows. The numbers aren't tracked.
But if you'd estimate, like, is my question basically is there like huge upsides from a capitalist standpoint in what you do right now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I would say there's far more aid that is pumped down into Africa from Europe and the US and a little bit from Asia. There's billions and billions and billions of dollars of aid that's sent over, and there's maybe $1 billion, but probably hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. But the opportunity for change is tens of billions of dollars of investment. We're just early. This is the beginning of that effort.
And what percentage of that tens of billions you hope capturing?
Oh, and whatever we capture, we capture. We're not. When you're in the impact space, you don't dream about what you're doing it the backwards way. I want to see the end of hunger and poverty in Africa. That is what Africa Eats is about. Right? I have a new one. I can do that one too. But my goal is to see the end of hunger and poverty in Africa before I die, like in my lifetime. The more I can do that through my efforts, great. But if my efforts inspire a dozen others to come in and join us and be capitalists solving this problem, then I also win. Like, I don't have to win by being the richest person at the end. I can win by just being the example that others follow.
How will you live up to 109?
No, I hope I solve that problem well before I turn 100.
How would you solve that one?
Oh, how do you solve hunger and poverty?
No,
Oh,
aging, longevity.
I'm not working on that. Not my effort.
But you want to live to 109. So how will you get there? What are your daily habits that will get you there?
Um, no, I never. You said that number. I didn't say that number.
Oh, it's on your article there, that you still want to be running Africa Eats 50 years after its incorporation.
Okay. Yeah, my daily habits are not I don't do anything special to live long. I just
But you should factor that in, right? Like me, I want to, as soon as I'm done with building the business that will build other businesses, which you have cracked, by the way. My next priority is longevity. After that, it's AGI. After that, it's brain computer interfaces. Because the longer I can live, the more time I have to solve the challenges that I want. So what's your opinion on that?
Oh, it's nice. I'm assuming a normal lifespan when I'm saying I want to see this in my lifetime. So
And I guess
it's got to be
109 will
solved
become
it's
normal.
got to be solved by the 2050s. Like
Yeah, there you go.
we can't have abject poverty in the 2050s.
Yeah, that would be quite archaic. Just that wealth and yet abundance doesn't catch up equally in the world. So how do you calculate that? Because some people will, by definition, like always live in poverty because they're comfortable in it, or they they just don't know better. What's your take on that?
Okay, so let's use China as an example. If you went back to China in 1985 and you looked at the stats, it would look like Africa in terms of poverty, and again, and hunger as in did everybody who wanted to eat today eat? The numbers were spectacularly horrible. And so how long ago was 1985? What's that? 15 to get to 2000 and add 20 more. So 35 years, 37 years. Their poverty rate, their abject poverty rate is like 1 or 2%. It's gone. Their median income is like $8,000, $12,000. Like it's 10 times higher than Kenya or Uganda or Ghana or Nigeria. How did they do that? They didn't do it with charity. They didn't do it. We didn't send a whole pile of charity. We didn't send them billions of dollars of aid. They did it with capitalism. Right? So 35 years. Okay. In China, you could say is a top-down, authoritarian state. So it's quicker. So let's go look at India. If you went and looked at India in 1991, you would see stats that look a little bit better than Africa, but not terribly better. And here we are, 25 years later, and their poverty rate's down to 20%. And again, we're talking about the same number of people, and nobody will claim that India is a smoothly run democracy. It's a democracy. It's a whole bunch of semi-independent, I don't know if they call them states, but regions. They do have the advantage over Africa that there is a national government, and they do act like a single government at times. But 25 years, and they've made a humongous dent in their poverty rate. So, 2050s is only 25 years away. That's doable.
All right. How precisely will you accomplish that? You have the capital part, you have the operational part, I'm guessing, in Africa. You have a system on who you will accept in your program. What else would you have, especially on the innovative side, to solve this problem? Or is innovation even out of the question? Is just basic stuff that needs to be implemented?
It's innovation, but it's 19th century innovation, much more than 20th or 21st. And yeah, we have cell phones, and of course that gets used, and that makes everything much more efficient than the 19th century. But ultimately, the way you solve hunger is looking at the way food moves from farm to fork. About a third to a half of it gets lost in Africa before it gets to a fork. Right? They call post-harvest losses. We know from researching our companies that we've invested in that their post-harvest loss rate is 2%. So by buying the food from the farmers, putting it in a modern truck with refrigeration, bringing it to a processing facility, and owning the food once it's taken off the farm, now we have capitalism. Now we have the incentive to treat the food as good as possible, because every time we lose the food, we lose money. So it's our loss if post-harvest losses are literally our losses on our bottom line. So we get it down to single-digit percentages, right? Well, there'll always be some losses because there's always rotten food mixed in or food that gets damaged on the way to the fork. So that's the main solution for hunger, is simply not wasting the food that got grown. And then on the poverty side, it is literally buying the food from farmers. Full stop. If you buy food from existing farmers, they make an income. They tend to have an income that doubles. So rather than being subsistence farmers, they're suddenly middle-class farmers that have a surplus of money and can pay for the quality of life needed to send kids to school, put shoes on their kids' feet, get health care, and then pull themselves out of poverty from there.
Education, more jobs, more entrepreneurship, more companies, more taxation. Is taxation an issue in Africa?
Oh yeah. So there's very little tax base. So the more you can create incomes for people, the more chance there is for the governments to fund themselves and build the infrastructure that's needed, and and again pull the whole economy up. And if you look back, what's I don't know, surprising to me is when I dove into this, right, I'm a techie, right? I built software companies for 20 years. This is not what I studied in school. This is what I've studied in the past decade. So go look at 1850s USA, 1850s America, and go look at the statistics of how many people were farmers, how many people were hungry, how many people were subsistence farmers. And again, you see the same stats as you'll see in Africa today. And this is how we solved the problem in the 19th century. We built the food and ag supply chain. We started feeding the cities with these farmers. We started building, we built railroads and then trucks and cold rooms. We had, ice houses to store food back in the 19th century before electricity. We have electricity in Africa. We can do this with electricity and power. So we can do it quicker. But this is what we did in the US to be rich. Again, we didn't do this with philanthropy. There was no my joke is there was no philanthropists on the moon that were funding the growth of the US. Right? We had to fund ourselves. So we did that. Now it's a rich country.
Right. And when you have food, education, and your basic needs taken care of, a couple of percentage of times you get innovation.
Yeah, they'll innovate themselves. I don't have to tell them what's needed. They'll figure it out.
It's like I'm bored and I'm just gonna try stuff and be
It's
creative.
not even
and
bored. It's like I'm living in this spot and I would like a better quality of life. And if only I did X, I think my life would be better. I'll go do X, and if it works, I can sell that to my neighbors. And but you can't sell it to them if they don't have any money. So first thing you have to do is get people to have an income. First thing you have to do is get people to have food, so that they're not hungry all the time, so that they're not, so they have the chance to think, and then money in their pocket so that they have the chance to buy things. And then in terms of market, like, go back to this idea of, is there opportunity for-profit solutions? Well, if you had $3 a day more in the hands of 1.4 billion people, then you have $4 billion a day to go get as a solution provider, as a company. Like, that's not an insignificant amount of money. It's just a large number of customers with very, very small baskets, shopping baskets, as opposed to selling Teslas.
So you're solving food. What about water, drinkable water, and what about sanitation?
Not two areas that I'm working on. Other people have to
Why
solve.
not?
Food is the easier one to solve.
Looks easy on paper. I'm pretty sure it's challenging. What challenges have you faced so far?
The biggest challenge, everything's hard, right? I'm making it sound easy, but trying to build a business with 500 farmers as your vendors is hard. And then when you want to double, it's 1,000 farmers, and when you double, it's 2,000 farmers. And our biggest one is doing 25,000 farmers at the moment out of 300 million. So we got a ways to go. What's the biggest challenge in that growth to get to that scale is capital. And so there is a big gap of capital in Africa between, I have an idea and it seems to be working, and oh my God, it's working so well, I got $1 million of revenue. Like, the gap between those two moments in time is almost completely unfilled.
Yeah. How, as a techie, how are you being patient with farmers? Because I guess it's pretty much night and day between your brain and theirs. How do you manage that?
We have different knowledge, but they have the same level of intelligence. Their intelligence is just focused on how you get food to grow out of the ground. I don't know how to get food to grow out of the ground. That's not something I've done. I don't know how to feed my family on my own piece of land. It's not something I ever learned how to do. Right. So they know how to do their life. I know how to do my life. My job is to go find money from places in the world that have money, so that they can go do their job. Right. Again, their job is to grow food. They're just mostly not paid for it right now. My job is to go fund companies that will pay them to go do their job. And if they, once they have money, if they want to change jobs, that's fine. There's plenty of farmers to fund.
And your thesis is not, because me, it'd be like teach them how to fish, educate them, and then, you know, they will be able to thrive. But before that, they need to have food in their brain to even be taught, and reason and energy to build up on that knowledge. Is that right?
Kind of, but I'm gonna argue here that they already know how to fish. They just
Yeah.
don't have any bait.
Yeah, but why are you
They're fishing.
paying?
They're fishing with a yeah, bad, not a great analogy, but they're fishing with a stick that they found under a tree,
Yeah.
and they don't have any string and they don't have any hook. All they have is the stick, right? And so I am bringing them I'm not bringing them anything, because I don't invest in farmers. I invest in companies that buy from farmers. I am bringing them companies that give them the string and the hook, and buy the fish once that's caught. And they can
Okay.
eat as much of the fish as they want, and they can sell as much as the fish as they want. That's the choice of the farmer, or in this case, the fisherman.
Okay.
But we're giving them the string and the hook
And
and the
it's
bait.
a donation. It's no strings attached, or it's an investment.
No, the only time, like the real world example would be, we have honey companies that literally give away beehives and
Okay.
training to farmers. And in exchange, those farmers promise to sell us their honey, not give us their honey. There's no charity here. So we're giving away beehives because we need more honey, because we have customers that want honey and beeswax. So
Yeah.
we need the honey and the beeswax, and we can't find enough farmers that know how to raise bees, because there aren't enough farmers. So in many cases, we just give them the beehives, and in other cases, we sell them the beehives. In other countries, we only sell beehives. We'll still train them if they want the training. That's free. The training's always free. But we'll only sell them the beehives, and then we'll offer to buy their honey from them. So it depends on, you know, how popular beekeeping is in that case. But in other cases, like, we'll look for potato farmers. We'll find farmers that already know how to grow potatoes, but then we'll train them on how to increase their yields.
Right. I had the honey slash beekeeper from Africa on my pod this year, so maybe I'll introduce you to him and see if he seems like a good investment. By the way, he was looking for investment. I'm pretty sure you know him also.
Which country?
Um, South Africa, Tanzania.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll introduce you to him. Very nice guy, very knowledgeable guy. Um, you run the company Berkshire Hathaway style. Warren is famous for investing in companies. I mean, you know, sugar water, Coca-Cola. It's not. It's
He's
not the
not the
most.
most impactful investor.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's an ethical, right? Like, you're feeding these community with sugar water, they get obese, you know, and it's a slow death. In my opinion, that is, as a biohacker and someone that's obsessed with longevity. Um, how do you shift that philosophy in your impactful way?
So we have a lens of, we'll only invest in companies that either solve hunger and poverty or solve land restoration and carbon sequestration. So we have a theme around what we're investing in, whereas Warren's only theme is, will it make me money? He doesn't care what it does as long as it makes him money. And that's been his theme his whole life, right? You read his biographies. He, as a kid, before he was even 10, his goal was to make money. That's been his theme his entire life, and he's succeeded at that wildly. So yeah, we would never invest in Coca-Cola or something like that. We would never invest in he owns a Unicol, an oil company. We're not going down that path. But we will take lessons. Like, he's a brilliant investor in many of the things that he's done and has talked about. Like, I love the fact that he openly tells us what he does and why he does it. He's got great lessons in there, so we're listening to him and we're copying the lessons. We're just not investing in the same type of companies.
And who's your Charlie?
Jimene Tafawa. Although he would probably say I'm more Charlie than he is, but anyway, my trusted number 2 is a Nigerian-born former banker, former growth hacker, I would say, in an African sense, entrepreneur, awesome human being. Grew up around the world, but born in Nigeria.
And he's working with Chat Africa Eats.
He's the co-founder.
Okay. Nice. I'll
But
research it out.
unlike Warren and Charlie, we actually started it from scratch. We didn't buy it off the shelf.
Okay. Jumani Tafa. Well, I should interview him on this spot, right?
Yeah, should.
Okay. So I mean, as a former techie, what tech aspect do you have in your current business, or is there zero tech?
Well, of course there's tech because we're using, Gmail and Google Sheets and that stuff. But yeah, you're going, but where's the software in that? Yeah, somebody already wrote that. What I learned from 20 years of being a techie building software companies, right? And being in the room in the sales calls, because I was the technical salesperson. I was the founding technical person, so the sales team would drag me along on sales calls, all B2B companies. And my philosophy at the end of that was we should build the least amount of technology to solve the problem. Like the less software, the better. The smaller the software team, the better. More technology doesn't actually make life better for us or the customers. And so I bring that philosophy to my impact world, where I get all the way to I'm solving hunger and poverty. And okay, what's the minimum amount of tech that's needed to solve that? We need WhatsApp. We need things that are off the shelf. In terms of custom software, one of our companies called Agro Supply built some custom software. They are the only, as far as I've seen, they're the only company in Africa selling seeds and other inputs to farmers using a layaway model, an investment model, rather than a debt model. And to do that, they needed some software, so they built it themselves. They have an in-house software team. East Africa Foods is our largest aggregator of foods. It's potatoes and onions, bananas, and stuff like that. 10,000 farmers and 10,000 retailers. And so matching up supply and demand, figuring out when that farm has food versus that farm has food. They have built some custom software to help optimize the internals of that. Nothing terribly complicated. This is not no AI yet in any of this. It's database software.
I see that Jumani is also into oil and gas, talking about social impact and so forth. Is it true to say that, yeah, once you don't even have food on the table or money to buy food on the table, environment is just not a priority?
Well, you want to go down that path. The average U.S. home uses more carbon output than like 100 or 500 African homes. So yeah, things that and the audience I might have taken things for granted from the audience. When I say farmer, subsistence farmer, there's no electricity in their community. There's no running water in their community. They don't have hot water to take a shower in the morning. Their energy consumption is powering their cell phone, and maybe they have a solar lantern to light up their house at night, but maybe not. So no, we don't worry about that type of output. These are not people who own a bicycle, let alone a motorcycle or a car. We're dealing with the if you graphed the energy consumption of all the humans on the planet, Americans would be on the left at the high end, and the farmers we're talking about would be way on the long tail. Like literally the 7 to 8 billionth person on the planet in terms of energy consumption.
Right. Yeah, I was more referring to, the economics and the livelihoods of the African economy. Like if you can, I mean, there's not much oil and gas there, but I know that mines are still quite prolific there in Africa. So,
Yeah.
I guess it can be a fair trade-off to, yeah, not do too good to the environment, although there is some economical impact of, yeah, just like opening a mine and so forth. But what do people principally work into Africa, and how can the African economy be improved as a whole?
Oh, okay. So yes, mining is you're mining for gold, for gems, for copper, cobalt, things like that is a significant part of the GDP of the continent, and a significant part of the economies for the countries that have those resources, and it's randomly distributed around the continent. But at the same time, the number of people who are working in that industry are like 5% of the total population of the continent. By far the biggest, I can't even say employer, about 80% of the adults are farmers.
No
So
way.
yeah, so best to think of this in, if you were to land on the continent and look around, it's going to look more developed and middle class because you landed in a city. But only about 10% of the population is living that middle class, the global middle class lifestyle. And then the other 90% are not. And of the other 90%, most of those are farmers. Most of them are living on an acre to a hectare. They're farming it, they're feeding their family on that farm, and they're living off of whatever surplus they get.
What lessons can a tech founder learn from your deployment and rapid deployment and huge impact that you had with Africa Eats in Africa?
I would say that there are other opportunities besides the piece of software that saves the first world person a minute or a dollar. That if you step back 100,000 feet, step back a mile and look at the business plans of most tech startups, you can summarize it to either saving a dollar or saving a minute for somebody who has plenty of dollars and plenty of minutes. And yeah, there's lots of companies make money doing that. And the other model that works is entertaining us. There are billions of people on the planet who don't have too much money and too much time. Why don't you go solve one of their problems? There are literally billions of those people out there. You don't know them because they don't live in your neighborhood. They don't live in your country, but they have needs, and you can go solve a problem and make a huge dent in the world. And if you're successful, money will follow, because again, it's billions of people. You add up a few dollars per head over billions of people, and you get plenty of money.
Because when I think of Africa, I mean, there's been like Rocket Internet that has deployed a couple of startups here in Nigeria. I mean, in tech, right? The Airbnb of Nigeria, the Uber of Nigeria, and so forth. Nigeria is just exponentially growing, but you're
Yeah,
saying
but
that there's
again,
also simpler businesses, not necessarily tech ones.
I would say that yes, there are the X of Y's all over Africa, and some of them have done well in terms of valuation, at least. I don't know about profits. But they're targeting no more than 10% of the population. Why would you, if you had the choice of, we see this in the States, right? You have the choice. You can either build your super high-end luxury brand, or you can build the one that works for the majority of Americans. Like, both models work. Apple makes a ton of money selling really high-end products to a small percentage of people, and Samsung makes a large sum of money selling same basic products at a lower price to everybody else. Right? To me, if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a new entrepreneur, and my advice to new entrepreneurs is do the one with the bigger customer base. Like, that's the easier path. Don't do the one that you're targeting 10% of the population. And if you're doing something that's only targeting Americans, you're only targeting 5% of the global population. You're forgetting about 95%. You're missing 8 billion people. And so you have some skills that are rare in the world. Tech skills are rare in the world. And they get rarer when you leave the US. So go find a problem out there that's a serious problem and go solve it.
Once you solved something in Africa, I mean, you're pretty much fit for any type of markets, are you?
You don't need another market. You can solve something for India. You don't need another market. It's 1.4 billion people. That is multiple times bigger than the US population. Of course, you're going to get less per person, but it's plenty big. You don't need to solve a problem for the whole world. Just find a few 100 million people somewhere else outside the US and go solve it. Yeah. when I say real problem, go solve hunger, poverty, climate, social justice, loss of nature, forest deforestation, right? Go do some software that does something other than save a minute.
Luni, where can we find out more about you?
A few different places. So you can find me on, I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm Lunar Mobiscuit on Twitter. That's also the name of my personal website, lunarmobiscuit.com. I'm not going to spell it. Just ask Google for Luni, Luni, and it'll find me. Africa Eats is africaeats.com. Africa Trees is africatrees.ltd. The .com was taken. Fledge is fledge.co. But again, Google will find all this stuff for you if you just type in my name. Luni's pretty unique.
Was Luni Libes and Charles Cormier for another CEO Wisdom podcast.com.